to the Masters of Horror. Round of applause.
Thank you, everyone. I can't believe that both Fantastic Fest and Masters of Horror are sharing a 20th anniversary. How old does that make everybody feel? Certainly me. So I've told the story of the genesis of this show numerous times, but I guess I should once again. It started out with a series of dinners that we held. A lot of the filmmakers within the genre knew each other from either DGA meetings or conventions or film festivals, or just coming across one another through mutual friends and the like. So we had these dinners. It started out, there were 12 people there. It was Wes Craven and Tobe Hooper and John Carpenter and Joe Dante. John Landis, you were at the first one, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, and Don was at the first one as well. And so there was a birthday party going on at the table next to our table. And we started to join in singing happy birthday. And at the end of it, Guillermo del Toro stood up and said, "The Masters of Horror wish you a happy birthday." So we've self-deprecatingly called ourselves the Masters of Horror ever since. And we would talk about at these dinners, getting together and running our own lives and our own show. And so basically the lunatics were in charge of the asylum. So I came up with the idea of putting it into an anthology format where it would be a series of 1-hour movies that were self-contained and made by people who have a personality, a cinematic personality. And so it would be people like Tobe Hooper and Joe Dante and Don Coscarelli and Ernest Dickerson, all of whom were encouraged. Unlike Tales from the Crypt, where there was a style to the show, we wanted to be schizophrenic. We wanted everybody to express their own cinematic personality. And so that was the concept, how it was born. I pitched it to people. We went out to 3 different places and pitched it. All 3 of them said yes, but Anchor Bay said, how much and when can we start shooting? And we started pre-production at that time. So that is the genesis of it. And let's see, Ernest, you were in season 2, right?
Yeah.
But one of the first people I talked to about it was Joe Dante, and we had done anthologies as well in the previous years. We both worked on Amazing Stories. I was on the staff of that show and wrote 10 of the episodes, and Joe directed 2 of the episodes, including one that I wrote. So Joe, tell me about the anthology experience.
Well, directors like anthology shows because they are shorter than movies, especially for TV. And the appeal in this one was not only was it material that we all loved, but the guarantee from Anchor Bay and Showtime was that we had carte blanche as long as we followed a couple of rules. One was we had to shoot it in Canada, and 2, we had to shoot it for not much money. But also we were able to have, there was no censorship in terms of how gruesome it could be, and you could have any kind of nudity or sex as long as it wasn't male frontal nudity, which still was not popular apparently with the people at the networks. But because of this, the appeal, and one of the reasons that we were able to get so many names to do the show was that there was really no limit on what if you could find something that you thought would be interesting to do, you had the wherewithal to do it, and you could do it any way you wanted as long as obviously you kept the budget in mind. So most of us went around and tried to find stories that we thought would adapt to a 1-hour format, and some of the people involved came back for the second season. And a number of people did some of their best work on this show, even though it was for television.
Yeah, it was a great opportunity for me to be able to say to Joe, to Don, to Ernest, to John Carpenter, to Tobe Hooper, do what you want and do it the way you want it. As long as you can do it on time and on budget, then you're free. And 1 or 2 of the people had difficulty doing it on time and on budget. I won't go into that. But the show, basically every show was a 10-day shoot, And if you went over, you're infringing on the next director doing his show. So nobody could go over. It was a television schedule. They cost $2 million each. Showtime only paid $200,000 to license each one. So that wasn't enough for them to have any input at all. And my job was basically to deflect the notes from the other producers who tried to get their hand into our pie. But it was ours.
Which he did quite well, as a matter of fact.
Thank you.
The only issue with Showtime came up at the end when Takashi Miike did his episode.
Imprint.
It's called Imprint. It's beautifully made, as all of his films are. It's torture to watch, and it must have been particularly difficult for the sound mixers who had to watch over and over again, back and forth, these images that were pretty difficult to take. However, it is included in the box set of that season's.
Which is how we got away with it, because at that time, Walmart sold 40% of all DVDs being sold in the United States, and they would not carry Imprint when it was released singly because of that. But they didn't know that it was in the box set. And I think the Roku channel is showing all 26 episodes now, and they have commercials in it, but no censorship.
Well, there's a couple of other semi-fly-by-night cable channels that show it, but they blur out a lot of stuff.
Oh, really?
Now with the excitement of the new technologies, it allows you to cut movies without having to actually cut them. So if somebody's ripping somebody's heart out, they just blur the image so you can't see it.
Oh, I didn't know
I don't
that.
recommend watching those versions.
Yeah, there are some Blu-rays. They weren't all on Blu-ray, but some were. Now, that was the thing about the Imprint episode. It was tough for me to take, but it's not Mick Garris's Masters of Horror. It's Takashi Miike's Imprint. It's Joe Dante's Homecoming. It's Ernest's The V Word. It's Don's Incidents in and on and off a mountain road. So it was hard for me to say. By the way, Imprint was released in Japan with 8 minutes more footage as a feature film in theaters. So those 8 minutes were all cut out of the torture sequence. So that tells you what kind of movie it is. It's absolutely stunning and beautiful, and the lengths to which it goes into the torture, Miike-san told me when we were shooting, the more that she's tortured, the more sympathy we have toward her. So that was his philosophy on how he made his film.
His influence.
So Don, your show ended up being the first one to air. It was not the first one produced. But tell me how you went about that. And in fact, I believe your writer is here tonight.
Yeah, that's true. I think that my episode, or our episode, probably had was the most Texas-centric creatively, because it was based on the great Joe R. Lansdale,
Yes.
who wrote the short story, if anybody's ever read Joe's stuff. And I also had been coming here to the Alamo in Austin and had met the inimitable Stephen Romano, a local legend, who came on and wrote, Stephen, yes? He co-wrote the episode with me, and that was pretty cool. It was Joe seized on something nice there, though. Making something in the short form was a lot of fun and a little less pressure than making a real movie. Yet they did have a level of reality to them. Any rate, I selected this Joe Lansdale. Well, actually. Okay, I saw this book that Joe Lansdale had written, and there were 2 short stories jumped out at me for films. And I decided to option both of them. One of them was Incident on and Off the Mountain Road, and the other one was Bubba Hotep. I was successfully able to get Bubba Hotep financed, but the Incident was just a little too short. And I love this story because it's just a twist on the usual slasher thing. This old the old saying, which has fallen out of it as it well should, the damsel in distress movie. And this thing just turned it on his ear, because we had this really big, brutal monster in the thing, and he just picked the wrong girl to fuck with, and paid the price big time. And then there's a really good twist. And I read the short story, and having grown up around my mother, who was a feminist, and reading Ms. Magazine when I was in my teens,
Jeez.
I thought, this could be my feminist movie to make. And nobody would, of course, want to make it as a feature. But when Mick suggested that he wanted to make the Masters of Horror, it immediately struck me that could be a really great episode. So I gave him the book to read, or the short story, and he said that would be great, and we went right into it. The one other thing I wanted, before I lose my microphone, we really should talk a little more about these dinners, Mick, because this was where it came from. Because for me, I didn't really know that many directors. It wasn't that collegial, especially being in the horror genre. You'd go to these Directors Guild events. There were no horror directors around, except for maybe Mick I kind of knew. And to go to this dinner, this very first one, and sit down and have Larry Cohen on one side and Tobe Hooper on the other. Yes, Stuart Gordon, Joe, and John Carpenter and Guillermo. All.
Do we have a Deadpool list here?
Yeah. Well, we should also, in memory of Stuart Gordon, just a wonderful, gentle, talented man.
Larry Cohen,
and Larry
Tobe
Cohen,
Hooper,
and
Wes
Tobe
Craven.
Hooper. Yeah, they're really
Just
wonderful
wonderful
people.
guys.
I lose them.
And it's one of the reasons we didn't have any Masters of Horror dinners for 6 years until last March. And one of the reasons was I just couldn't get it up to do that without those guys coming, because they would come regularly.
Yeah. Well, what's weird is these dinners started to morph, and really interesting and strange people would show up that I was never expecting. One time, a couple of years ago, I'm at one, and there's some European guy next to him, and I go, "Oh, hi, I'm Don. What's your name?" He goes, "Vim." And I go, "Vim Vendors?" He goes, "Yeah, wow, cool," And
Ken Russell.
oh my God, Ken Russell came to one of the dinners, which was fantastic. And then, yeah. And then one time, Eli
Tim
Roth
Curry.
brought this woman. I didn't know who the heck she was, and it was Lucio Fulci's daughter came, which was, so we had a lot of interesting people to talk to. So anyway.
Well, before you give up your mic, everything you'd done before Masters of Horror was independent and non-union, if I'm not mistaken. So tell me the difference between that experience, because you had a schedule and a budget to make that was ironclad. And I know you had one of the most complicated episodes to shoot. So tell me about the difference in the experience.
Mick, we were pushing up against you a little bit there at the end. At one time, we didn't get the day finished, and Mick had to come down and
That's what I was hinting at.
Put me out of my misery. But no, there's the thing that was wonderful about it is we had large Canadian crew with all kinds of resources, and for like 2 nights, I was allowed to shoot with a techno crane, which I had never used before, and I've never used since. But every time I see some of our friends who do the big movies, they use the techno crane. It's this crane that just goes out. It can go 50 feet out, so you can have a dolly shot without moving the rig. It's awesome. But most regular filmmakers have those every day. But we had a lot of great stuff, a lot of resources. The Canadian crews were great, and also the locations up there were just gorgeous in Vancouver. So.
And for that story, even though it was set in Texas, I mean, you had some amazing locations and built some incredible sets.
Yeah, that's true. Which would then, this was the weird part about it, is we had this really cool cabin built, and they built it, and I said, "Oh, this is great." And at that time, Dario Argento was shooting his episode, and I see the cabin on this truck going away. I go, "Well, where is that going?" "Oh, we're going to put it in Dario's episode."
Recycling is for the planet.
And yeah. But lastly, one other thing was, I have to say there was a little competition among the directors because everybody wanted to distinguish themselves. And I remember that there were 2 episodes shooting before me, John Landis and then Dario, and I was preparing my episode, and I would get these, like Mick would come in and go, "You're not going to believe the bloody stuff that Dario's shooting. There's a woman eating a man's private parts, you know?" And I'm thinking, oh, God, I got to rethink my episode. I need something more dramatic. So, anyway.
Ernest, you had one of the original stories that I did called The V Word. And
You said it was based on something from your childhood.
well, not from my childhood, but from an earlier time. I had, on a Halloween night, a friend invited me to go to a mortuary and go upstairs where they were preparing the bodies for burial. And it was after hours, Halloween night, midnight, and this long corridor, it was right out of a horror movie. And we went into this room, and it's where the bodies were lying. We passed all of these bodies on gurneys. And we passed these bodies, and there were, some of them were covered, most of them not, most of them elderly and very blue and very dead. And we go into this one room where they drain the bodies of blood and put in the fluid. And there were 2 tables. One of them, both were covered with a sheet. One of them was a very large woman, and the other one was a tiny size with a little naked hand of a baby sticking out from under the sheet. And that inspired me to write The V Word, which is our only vampire episode.
Yeah, I remember. But how old were you when that happened?
Well, I was an adult. I was an adult.
You were an adult, okay.
Yeah.
Because I always thought it was you much younger, but that was the whole idea, was to make it this nightmare sequence, this nightmare episode when this friend invites his other friend to go into go into the morgue and check it out. And I remember you were absolutely one of the best producers I ever worked with. You have producers who are enablers. You have producers who are Dr. No's, I used to call them, where they say no to everything. And you were so supportive, man.
Well, my job was to protect you guys.
Yeah.
You guys were there because you're special. You weren't just directing an episode of television. You were directing your own movies and your established personalities. And that was really important to me. If I weren't there to protect each of your visions, it would have been a shitty show.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have just been another TV show.
Yeah, that's why it was so great. So I was honored when you asked me to join. You said, "Do you have any stories you want to do?" And I said, "Oh my God, I don't have anything. I don't." You said, "Well, I have this story idea. I have this script. Take a look at it." And I thought it was a chance to do something really, really, really creepy. And I think we pulled it off. It was we shot in this old abandoned hospital in Vancouver that I think is haunted. I think they actually did a couple of films there about this haunted hospital, and there were definitely areas where you should not go, and it was great. It was great to work with Michael Ironside, who was so cool, and had a lot of fun. My main thing that I remember, I kept pushing my cinematographer to go darker.
Yeah.
Right on the edge.
You use practicals rather than stage lighting or theatrical lighting. And the effect is so great, the blacks are so black.
Yeah.
And you have pools of light rather than illumination from sources.
Yeah, it was scary. And getting little reflections in the walls and stuff just to play silhouettes against them. Because I wanted it to really go deeper than most television is willing to go. And, I think we pulled it off.
Well, you started out as a director of photography.
Mm-hmm.
So you think visually, but also in terms of pushing the story forward. Tell me about the things that have most impressed you cinematically when it comes to the horror genre, because you're also quite a student of international film as well as domestic film, and particularly in the genre.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Mario Bava. And another cinematographer turned director, and I could definitely say he definitely influenced the stuff that I did, especially on that episode. There's a film that he did called The Whip in the Body, which I think was banned in England for many years. And I was always surprised at how dark he went with that and some of the things he was able to do. Darker than most people were willing to go in color. You know, doing black and dark stuff in color was really hard back in those days. And so that was my main inspiration. So I really wanted to get a nightmare feeling, because the way you described what happened to you, it was like a real nightmare, walking into a real nightmare situation. So I wanted to try and capture that. And you put that into the script, so.
Yeah, well, it made me realize that for a lot of people, death is entertainment. And when you're confronted by it, when you're 20 years old, you don't bump into death very often. But as the years pass and you have more experience and more lifetime, you start to realize the importance of life and how earth-shaking death is. And horror movies are all about death and confronting death in one way or another. And it just made me think about what my life's work was and what it continues to be in a really eye-opening way, where I was suddenly confronted by the end that we're all going to reach and telling stories about the path to getting there.
But I mean, you know, it was an interesting situation going in there, knowing who else was making their films. You know, and
Did you feel competitive?
Intimidated a little bit, maybe. You know, intimidated a little bit. I said, I gotta really put my A game in this one. You know, but yeah, it was a little scary. But the crew was great, and you were great, and I had a good cast, and it was a great 10 days.
Well, the first place that anybody ever saw Masters of Horror was in Torino, Italy, at the Torino Film Festival, which is not a genre festival, but mostly artier kinds of movies. And we ran several of them, and Joe came, and Don was there, I was there, Dario was there, Landis was there, and Joe's episode, Homecoming, got a 10-minute standing ovation. It was so powerful, and everybody was so proud, because this was about the Iraq War. And nobody was doing political satire. They were afraid to. This was under the Bush administration. And so it took our scrappy little show to confront that, and it took Joe Dante to do it. So Joe, tell me about that experience. First of all, bringing that story to the show, how you approached it, and then the experience of that live audience seeing
Well, let me preface it with the fact that when you watch Masters of Horror, there are a lot of producer credits. There's only one producer, and he's sitting here right now. And the fact that he stood up for us among some people who I can best describe as dunderheads. One of whom was my
I
first,
got stories about that.
one of whom was my first agent when I went to Hollywood. And I remember my first meeting with him at a restaurant, and I'm sitting across from him, and he's talking to me supposedly about becoming his client, and he's not looking at me. He's looking here. He's looking here. He said, let's see who came in. Who's over there? Who should I be? Oh yeah, sure. No, I'm listening. And I thought, this guy's going to represent me. And then of course I re-encountered him on Masters of Horror, and he was every bit the gallant fellow I had thought he was.
I think I can guess who that was.
But anyway, Sam Hamm, my writer friend, and I were pissed about what was going on politically with the war and the fact that nobody was saying anything about what a boondoggle it was. And so we found this short story that Sam adapted into what is basically a sort of a screed in which the soldiers who come back from the war and are dead soldiers come back from the war and come back to life to vote out the people who sent them there. And it's probably pretty dated now, but because things are so much worse than they were then. But it was very well received overseas, obviously. And it's a zombie story, and it was. I sent it around to all the right-wing commentators I could think of to try to piss them off. And none of them responded, which meant they either threw it out or they didn't bother watching it, or they did bother watching it. But it was honestly the only American production at the time that was saying anything critical about what was going on, because people just didn't. They thought it would be unpatriotic. And I got a lot of bad mail. I got a lot of people saying, we're going to burn all your DVDs because you're not an American, you hate America, and all that crap. But I was proud that I made it, and I could never have made it anywhere else but for Masters of Horror. Nobody would have taken it as a feature. It certainly couldn't have been a network show. And it took Masters of Horror to get that kind of story out. And so when it came time for me to do my second episode, I found this story called The Screwfly Solution, which I had been trying to make as a feature when I was working for Roger Corman. And it's a story about a pestilence that causes men to want to kill women. And it was, I made it. It turned out to be, a pretty good episode, but so depressing. And the most violent thing I ever did, and has no humor in it. There's no humor in it, which is unusual for my stuff. And
extraordinary for you.
I realized I could never have made it as a feature film, because not only would I have never got it, funded, but if it did get released, people would be shooting themselves in the aisles. And so, but nonetheless, I was happy to get to make it. And again, there's only one place I could have made it, and that was Masters of Horror. So the great thing about that whole set of films is that a lot of them are just material you would never have seen made anywhere else. And that's why I really regretted its demise when it wasn't picked up for the third season.
Yeah.
Well, I would rather celebrate the 26 great episodes we did than mourn the 13 that might have gone south.
Yeah.
Hey, Mick, I just thought of another one of your mandates in making, which you've excluded, is you mandated that all films would be shot on 35 millimeter film, right?
Well, there was one that wasn't,
No,
and that was Joe.
My episode was the first thing I ever shot on digital.
Digital.
And I found it really interesting, actually.
And you also used cameras that were mounted in these circular mounts.
It was like a steering wheel.
Yeah.
I don't know if they still use those now, but I had Attila Zile was my DP, and he was really good. I really liked working with him. But he tried to come down to America to work, but of course there's union issues and stuff, so he was never able to do it.
Why did you decide to go digital?
I don't remember.
Because of the cameras.
The cameras were so small.
Yeah.
And I had so little space to work in and it was an experiment.
Yeah.
Where else can I do an experiment but Masters of Horror?
We encouraged it, yeah. But it was kind of the death knell of 35 millimeter film. It was still the standard, but everything was going digital at that time. So it wasn't really a mandate so much as a practical issue.
Right. Well, you gave us the opportunity because it was coming to an end, my
Yeah.
recollection.
But Ernest, what are your favorite horror movies, and what is the appeal of horror to you?
I grew up watching horror films. The earliest movie I remember seeing is the movie about the giant octopus that destroys the Golden Gate Bridge. I think I was probably around 5 years old when I saw that. But my cousin always used to take me to see horror films. So as a kid, I went to see, I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. A lot of horror films growing up. When I finally saw Black Sunday, Mary Bava's Black Sunday, that really blew me away. To me, the great thing about horror films, they're the perfect surrealist cinema. It's the cinema of dreams,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what film is all about. Film is all about, living our dreams, seeing our dreams up on the screen. Nightmares, yeah, but the nightmares are the cool ones because you get to wake up afterwards and go home, and you confront those horrors and you live through them. But I've always been fascinated. As a kid, I used to read Famous Monsters of Filmland, and I was always fascinated by how the movies were made. The visual effects used to fascinate me. At one point as a kid, I wanted to be a visual effects artist. And any film by Ray Harryhausen was something I would just go to see. And seeing it on the big screen was always an amazing thing. So growing up, seeing movies like Rodan in the theater and The Mysterians, the Japanese films, I grew up at a time where most of our televisions were black and white. So seeing a movie in widescreen in color with visual effects and aliens or flying dinosaurs destroying Tokyo was the big thing, And then when I started reading it, I was reading science fiction from an early age, but then I started reading horror in high school. And then I discovered the work of H.P. Lovecraft. Mm-hmm. And there were things about it that disturbed me quite a bit, the racism. But those stories were the only stories that I ever read that really scared me. That really left an uneasy feeling with me. And so that really kind of grew my appreciation of cosmic horror, because I think the universe is a pretty scary place. So finding, a lot of the European filmmakers, big fan of Argento's earlier films, Mario Bava all the way through. Some of Lucio Fulci's stuff. But there's a young filmmaker, Michele Soavi, who made some brilliant films and had a really short career, because Della Morte dell'Amore is one of my favorite films of all time. And that and The Church, I think, are my favorite films by him. And I hope one day he comes back. But Pupi Avati also did some really amazing films. So it's a genre that I love, finding new stuff and seeing some of the new folks coming out. It's really been really cool.
Joe, did you intend to go into horror once you became a filmmaker? It happened with Piranha and with
No, that's what was available. I had an affinity for it because I'd seen so many movies, and I loved horror movies, but I loved Westerns too, but nobody was making them. So when my first solo picture became popular, I suddenly became a horror director. And there are worse genres to be typed in, believe me, because as you know, horror movies have gone from a somewhat underrated genre into something that is considered a must for studios to make. I mean, now they spend a fortune on these pictures because horror fans are the most loyal people who ever go to the movies. And the one audience you can count on is the horror fan audience. And that's why even a low-budget horror film that isn't really maybe very good will get financed, because they know that if they can just get 2 weeks out of it, they can put it on video or streaming or somewhere and make a couple of bucks. And of course that often leads to fly-by-night people wanting to make something that's just really cheap to make money. But it's also an opportunity, particularly for younger filmmakers, because sometimes you can do horror films with only a small cast and in a small place, and a lot of it has to do with the atmosphere and the lighting and things that don't cost a tremendous amount of money. It's horror is here to stay, and it's amazing that it's replaced the Western, which used to be the dominant genre.
One of the great things about the horror film is that cinematically, it allows you the opportunity to be an expressionist. Mm-hmm. It's not a literal format, and that genre encourages invention, visual and cinematic invention, in the terms of telling a story in the ways that a drama or a comedy can't. How do you use those tools of cinema, Don, when you're conveying fright and fear?
Good question. A couple comments. I have a number of director friends who are known for comedies and dramas, and a couple decades after their films have been made, there are no places where you can come, and there are these loyal fans who still want to talk about your work, and that's really one of the blessings for all of us to work in this genre. The other thing I wanted to comment on what Ernest said, it triggered a memory at a Masters of Horror dinner with Stuart Gordon, and he was commenting on how he sees the horror film as a rehearsal of our own death. And that always stuck with me because, obviously we don't want to die, but maybe rehearsing it's not a bad idea, to sort of figure out what it's going to be like.
And he did H.P. Lovecraft for the Masters of Horror episode.
He did some of the best Lovecraft.
He did a lot of great stuff.
Really great Lovecraft.
He was, just back into his memory. I'm sorry, I'm so depressive here, but back to Stewart's memory. He was also a master of the stage. He started, and he actually got arrested in the 60s for a very subversive idea of a play that they put on. They came and arrested he and his wife. And he worked with David Mamet before Mamet really blew up. And just a sweet...
The Organic Theater in Chicago.
Yeah. And then he also did a great, I'm sure some of you might have seen it, a great play on the life of Edgar Allan Poe in Los Angeles, starring Jeffrey Combs. As one of his
his
works.
Reanimator was amazing.
Well,
his
yeah.
Reanimator on stage.
Yeah.
And his Poe show came out of his Black Cat episode for Masters of Horror.
Ah, okay, great. Yeah.
So anyway, about using the tools of cinema to express fear.
It's all in the close-up, Mick. Well, look, the tools of cinema, obviously we all learn by studying at the feet of the masters and watching films and seeing elements and then using them. And, a lot of people can comment about my films as they'll see elements of other masters in my films, and I gladly utilize some of those great techniques. But for me, it just feels like, a story simply told and, as visually as possible. That old saying about, see it, don't say it. And, using the moving camera and cutting to achieve your effects. And that's something in the horror genre, it just works.
Creating a sense of dread is so much fun.
That's true. And also another thing is that character is really important in the horror film, because if you can establish characters that the audience really roots for, then when you do something dastardly to them later, the audience really reacts.
Something they forgot in most of the movies of the genre in the 80s.
Yeah, that could be
the
true.
Slashers.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So, but yeah, I love the genre, and I love watching some of the new horror coming out. A great film that's a textbook in my mind for aspiring filmmakers out there is that film a couple of years ago, Oddity. If anybody's seen that film, I mean, that is the textbook of an elevated horror film that really got me scared and jumped.
Amazingly, Weapons was a huge success, and it's a great movie.
Yeah. It's a good movie.
So there's good original horror coming back, and it's been missing for a while. This is a great opportunity, I think, having these masters here to be able to...
Can I interrupt you for a second? After Guillermo coined that phrase, for years after, everyone was guilty of calling them the so-called masters of horror. So it was always a joke.
It was always a joke.
Yeah. But
So,
anyway, continue.
Anyway, having these people here, all of you out here, this is an opportunity for you to ask some questions. So I'm loving the opportunity to open it up to the audience, because it really is a great opportunity. They've got such great histories and futures and presents. So anybody who's got any questions, let's ask them. This always happens. Okay, here's one over here.
Have you thought about doing doing a season 3 with new filmmakers and doing it again?
The question is, have we thought about doing season 3? There kind of was a season 3 called Fear Itself on NBC. It's a piece of shit. I was originally involved in producing it until there was a strike coming up. They had sold it to NBC, which meant commercials and broadcast interference, broadcast standards, and I told them I wouldn't do it. Then Stuart Gordon convinced me by saying, what about Twilight Zone, Outer Limits? They did it. But you still couldn't give people like this a total free hand on what they're doing. But Stuart convinced me to try it. We did it. The writer's strike came along after we developed the 13 scripts, and they hired non-union writers from Canada to do it. They said, well, you can stay. You just give them the notes, and they'll do the rewrites. And I said, that's not acceptable to me. And it just turned to garbage, and I left the show. And it's the most painful professional experience I've had. So doing another Masters of Horror would mean, so thanks for pouring salt in the wound. Fuck you.
Another note is that there were a number of Fear Itself episodes, but only 5 of them actually were broadcast. The rest of them are living in limbo somewhere. They exist.
Yeah, they're on DVD, or were briefly, and they're shitty. Don't bother. But there's one good one, and that was Stuart Gordon's, which was the first one they aired.
I thought mine turned out pretty good.
Oh yeah.
You walked into that one, Mick.
Well, fuck me. I forgot that you did it because I thought you were on my side.
I had to fight for that one, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, the producers that you kept away from us on Masters, they had full reign on that.
Oh God.
So I'm doing a show. It was a comedy. It was a horror comedy, and the thing is that the main character is a guy who's not a good husband, not a good father. He's a bit of a slob. He's a veterinarian. One day this strange animal is run over by a truck and it's brought in and it bites him, and it turns out it's a wolf. It's a werewolf, and he starts to turn into a werewolf. And the thing about it is that as he becomes a werewolf, he becomes a much better father, a much better lover for his wife, and a much better human being. And there is a key scene in the film where we see him turn into the werewolf. Most of the stuff is happening off screen. He turns into a werewolf. So I'll never forget this one production conference I had. And I'm saying, okay, so I want to talk to, we got to put together, we got to talk to, who's going to do the werewolf, and, I got concepts and everything. And they said, werewolf, well, we can't afford a werewolf. I said, wait a minute. In the script, it says he turns into a werewolf.
Have you read the script?
They said, well, yeah, but we thought maybe you could do it with shadows on a wall or something. I said, wait a minute, that's the whole lead up to the show. You can't do it without seeing him turn into a werewolf. And they said, well, we can't afford a werewolf. So I said, no, I'm not going to accept this. I said, I got to find somebody to give me a werewolf. So I went to my old friend Greg Nicotero.
Yeah.
And I went to Greg, and I said, Greg, I got a problem here. You got any spare werewolves laying around? and he said, well, not really, but what do you want them to look like? And I said, I want a Bernie Wrightson werewolf. I want a wolf that's standing on 2 legs with both body. And actually, the concept art that I had was actually the middle of the transformation in American Werewolf in London, before he becomes the bear. When he's kind of like a human wolf. So we went down into his studio, and he found a suit that could be converted into a werewolf suit. And then they sculpted a head for me, like, radio controlled head, because they got this guy who was like 6 feet tall. The head added like 1.5 feet more, so he was like 7.5 to 8 feet tall werewolf. And so my episode actually had Wendell Pierce transform into like this beautiful 8 foot tall werewolf.
Oh, wow.
But it was
okay, there were 2 good episodes. Wait a minute. Larry Fessenden did a very good episode as well. There were 3 good episodes.
Yeah, it was.
And yours was written by Max Landis, right?
Yeah, Max Landis wrote it, and it was a great script. He's a good writer. But just getting that werewolf was a battle, and keeping it true to the story was a battle. It was I honestly got spoiled by Masters. Got spoiled by you as my producer, and I had to fight these. Excuse my French. I had to fight these motherfuckers. So,
So that introduces my final word on your question. The answer: why will there not be another season of Masters of Horror? Because there are other producers who would have to be a part of that show, and I don't want the show to be made if it has to be made with them.
yeah.
So. That ends that. There's another one.
Hey guys. Have you gentlemen had the opportunity to see any of the shows here at the 20th anniversary? And what are your thoughts on the current state of horror?
I haven't seen any of them, but I think the current state of horror is really encouraging. I think it's not just one shitty sequel after another coming out right now. There are original horror movies and even a couple of good sequels. I think the Final Destination and 28 Years Later movies were both really good.
It's a great summer for horror. You got Sinners. You
Sinners.
got you got Nosferatu. Nosferatu is a beautiful film.
You got Weapons. You got
Weapons is amazing. Yeah. So
Bring Her Back. I mean, there's a bunch of really good stuff.
yeah, I mean, horror's on the rise. I mean, I think it's finally getting the love that it deserves.
Anybody else? Here.
Me again. First of all, I want to say to each one of you that Masters of Horror, what it meant to me was that a fan of the Masters of Horror got to work with one of you. And that was me, of course. And it was a real honor because it was based on one of my favorite writers. And it was a dream come true. And I want to thank you, Mick, for making that happen. And I want to thank you, Don, for believing in me. And Joe, you've been a friend of mine ever since then, too. And I want to thank you for that. You did a commentary track for my Star Crash DVD, which was wonderful. And Ernest, I love your work, too. I love Demon Knight so much. And I want to ask each one of you what it meant to you in the end. And what it means to you now.
Well, what it meant to me as someone who wrote 4 episodes and directed 2 episodes, an opportunity to do something unfettered. It was the greatest experience of my professional career, but more importantly than making those 2 films of my own was being able to allow Joe Dante, Ernest Dickerson, Don Coscarelli, Dario Argento, John Carpenter, Tobe Hooper, all of these people to make the movies they wanted to make without interference. That will always be the most important thing I've ever done. And thank you for a great script.
Yes, well done, Stephen. Just the fact that we were able to make Joe's story, which no one else would have ever made, probably, and for me personally, why it's really meaningful is I was able to get one of my favorite actors a real starring role in something that wasn't him saying "boy," which was Angus Scrimm. And if you ever get a chance to watch his performance in that film, it's just so off the charts, wonderful. So that's what I love.
For me, it was a chance to break bread, to meet, break bread, and make friends with some people whose work I admire so much, and to share ideas with, and to become friends with them, and hang out. You know, it's a great brotherhood. It's a great brotherhood.
Yeah, I think the word opportunity is what really covers. I mean, we always scrounge around for things to make and try to get them funded. And here was something on a silver platter that was offered to us. Do something that you really want to do and do it your own way, and you're among your friends. And you know, it's very solitary often making movies. But here was a whole group of people who already knew each other mostly, and we just enjoyed being with each other. And the camaraderie of the dinners spilled over into the making of the show. So it was really a unique opportunity.
You know, I could interrupt and just give you a recreation of what it would be like at one of these dinners. Seriously, it would be, Joe Dante, I want you to go through blow by blow and tell me how you did the werewolf in The Howling. And he would do that. And maybe you'll do that for us now.
No, I hope not, no.
Well, that sounded like a final question, but we still have a couple of minutes if anybody. There's one back here.
Mr. Dickerson, you got your start shooting some of the greatest movies ever made. And Mr. Dante, you cut your teeth in the Corman School. So I was wondering how your past experiences, influenced your directorial work, and how you think the benefit of going into different departments and learning different skills.
Well, when you come up the ladder and you have to, work on low-budget movies and then hopefully a little higher-budget movies, and particularly if you get your start with Roger Corman, you learn everything. You learn how to do everything. You learn all of the pitfalls that can lay in front of you, all of which are thrown at you in a Corman movie. Well, there's not enough time. There's not enough money. It's can't get this actor, and this location is gone. You got to shoot this. You have to learn to think on your feet, and you have to learn to improvise. And all those things that you learn while you're climbing that ladder are things that you use later in your life and on bigger projects, but particularly on a show like Masters of Horror, which is essentially a B movie that's being made, for an hour long under certain strictures, and all of the tricks that you learn about where to put the dolly and how to point it in different directions and get two different scenes without having to move it, saving time. It's all about saving time. At the end of the day, you have to make your day. It's called, and that means that you got to get out of this location. You can't go to another location and you got another shot to do. Either it's going to have to be postponed, and you're going to have to fake it somewhere else. You learn the discipline of getting the job done, and hopefully you have enough talent to make it look like it's on purpose.
Yeah, my first film was a science fiction film called Brother from Another Planet as a professional DP, and I had scenes. There were scenes where John Sayles, the director, was actually in front of the camera, and so whenever that happens, that always puts the cinematographer in the position of being the director, the part-time director, and so that was interesting because. John was in front of the camera, but the way we decided to shoot the stuff with him and David Strathairn, who played the alien bounty hunters, if you've ever seen the film, was that we shot everything backwards. We had them stage it backwards, and then we flipped the film later on so that their movements all had a weird kind of alien move to it. And so that being my first time working was pretty interesting. But also, I wound up being on a bunch of films where the directors took acting roles. Spike Lee's first big film, She's Gotta Have It. He wound up acting in front of the camera playing Mars Blackman because the actor who was going to play that role got a quote-unquote real movie a week before we started shooting. And he was stuck. He didn't have anybody else to play it. And so he did that, and the other actor went on to do Revenge of the Nerds Part 2. So... But I was able to shoot some, interesting genre pieces earlier on. Tales from the Dark Side, Second Unit on Day of the Dead, and some other things. And then finally, when I did Demon Knight, which was my first big horror film, all that stuff that I learned previously kind of like that went into that.
Well, I really want to thank all of you guys for being on the show and making it the special thing that it became, and also the fans who embrace it so much. I can't believe it's 20 years ago. It feels like we just finished it. And the fans have embraced it in such a way that it continues to live. And being here, sharing a 20th anniversary with Fantastic Fest is really amazing, and being here with all of you is a really special event. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you for coming.